Job candidates are using AI to create bulletproof resumes that all look the same. TeamTrait's hiring assessments provide objective data about a candidate's work preferences, motivations, and decision-making abilities. Get the data you need to hire the very best talent every time. Sign up for a demo today at teamtrait.com. That's teamtrait.com. Welcome to the Manage Smarter podcast with hosts C. Lee Smith and Audrey Strong. We're glad you're here for discussions on new ways to manage smarter, hire, develop, and retain talent, improve results, and propel team performance to new heights. This is the Manage Smarter podcast.
So Lee and I were on the phone this morning, and we were talking, blah, 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 Monday morning, and he says, oh, God, I got to hang up. I just had three emergency pop-ups to come up. And so off the phone. And it made me think about our guest today because you know what he says? He says, you really need to have continuous listening to your business and your personnel to see the cracks in engagement or your lazy girl job kind of team members, those people hiding. It's impossible to continuously listen. You have emergencies, Lee.
Well, there's that, but it's continuously asking questions so that we actually get them talking and getting their answers to the questions because, I learned some things this morning, for example, that I was a little flabbergasted to learn, quite frankly,
no.
and it definitely has adjusted a couple of my strategy ideas. So, it's about asking questions and listening to the answers and shutting up so you can listen to the answers, something that salespeople don't do particularly well, but nonetheless, we've got a guy here that can help all of us.
Yeah, because he says, but it's beyond just doing like the employee internal surveys. It's way bigger than that. He's got ideas, trust me. Welcome to Manage Smarter, everyone. Continuous listening is how you manage smarter. We're glad that you're here. My name is Audrey Strong. I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications here at Sales Fuel.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm C. Lee Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of Sales Fuel.
And Nick Montalbine is the founder of Inner Voice Analytics and a former HR strategist at Nike and Legacy Health. He helps leaders turn employee feedback into performance intelligence, aligning culture, engagement, and strategy to boost business results. The team helps organizations catch the truth. I like it, like going fishing. Beneath the surface, using continuous listening, as I mentioned, and behavioral analytics to spot the cracks before they spread. He's got over 20 years driving, transforming inside Fortune 100s, deploying strategy, scaling culture, and leading ops across Nike. I watched Air, I think on Netflix. I'd be fascinated just to do 30 minutes with you, Nick, on Nike. Healthcare, finance, and retail. And he is a master black belt, he says, in Lean Six Sigma. That's a thing, right?
So it's been a thing. Yeah.
Well, welcome,
right.
Nick.
I'm happy to be here, Audrey. Good to see you, and Lee as well. Thanks for having me.
So the name of the company reflects the work that you're interested in. What happened to you that you became interested in this?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Spent like the great intro. Spent most of my career in Fortune, 500 companies, doing all the things, and I just got to a point where I was just like, we're just not listening to the pulse of the organization. We're trying. Organizations try. They do their annual engagement surveys. They do a bunch of action planning. But the problem is that employee sentiment moves way too fast nowadays. I mean, just think about our personal lives. Political events happening. I mean, you wake up on the wrong side of the bed. It just changes your sentiment and how you're showing up that day. And if you're only measuring things once a year or maybe quarterly, you're missing out on a bunch of stuff. So I went ahead and started Inner Voice Analytics. And the reason why we went up with Inner Voice is because we all have that inner voice in our head that kind of directionally tells us what we need to do. A good example of it is I just went to the dentist this morning and I have a little bit of a toothache and I'm like, oh, darn, I know it's my wisdom teeth, but maybe I'll just go ahead and go delay it even further, right? My inner voice said, no, just go ahead and go do it, right? Well, the inner voice exists in all these organizations, and sometimes we don't acknowledge it. We don't listen to it because it may take our strategy in a different direction. It may be inconvenient at the time, but the repercussions are large by not listening.
Or you don't want to deal with what it has to say because you don't like what it has to say.
Exactly. I.e. the wisdom tooth conversation of, now.
And did you floss?
Yes.
Exactly. I always lied about flossing.
We all do.
Okay.
We all do.
So what are examples of I almost feel like if I don't know anything about this topic and I'm listening to this podcast, my immediate first thought, Nick, is you're asking me to prove the negative. How do I know what to look for if I don't even know what I'm supposed to look for?
Yeah, and I think this is where just starting to have conversations with your employees
Okay.
starts to come on, and that's where this continuous part of it. I think what's happening in organizations, and rightfully so, we're all going Mach 2 with our hair on fire.
Hmm.
You know, priority after priority, curveball after curveball is coming out of us, right? And I think sometimes we're just forgetting one of the basic functions of leadership, which is the people aspect, right? And how what the day-to-day does to them, and the listening side of it, right? And I also do believe the art of the conversation is being lost. So one of the things that we work on is when we say we're doing continuous employee listening, we're having 30-minute conversations one-on-one with individuals to understand the good, the bad, the ugly of what's going on. Because when you're kind of filling out these surveys, you get limited. But when you have these dialogues, you go where the energy goes, right? And you're able to go and establish that rapport much more quickly, where you get a lot of those dirty secrets that I think sometimes people aren't willing to go ahead and go bring up, right? So back to your question, if you're leading your business or you're running your team, like how do you start having these conversations? I think you just start holding space for them. Um, and start to show that, yeah, you do want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if you also don't feel like that the team's ready for that, that's where you outsource it to organizations like myself, right? Where we're able to go ahead and come on in and build that rapport quickly. We protect the people that are giving us the feedback, and then we translate that into action plans that leaders can act on.
Audrey and I were talking about this just last week. We're both former broadcasters, so we have horrible dead air. But Audrey was telling me there's a time, particularly when you're having those conversations, where just shutting up and how did you phrase it, Audrey? Because you said it perfectly.
Don't fill the space. Just
Yeah.
ask a question. And if they don't answer and it's awkward, let it be awkward. But don't talk. Let them just fill the space. Let
I
them fill the
love
space.
that. I love that. And that resonates really, really well because I think as leaders, we try to fill that space, right? We try to show that we're on top of things, we know what's going on, but if you just kind of sit and be quiet a little bit, it makes the other person uncomfortable sometimes where maybe
Oh,
they'll fill the space,
certainly. Right.
right?
Exactly. That's how it works. Yeah.
Exactly,
You'd be
exactly.
surprised
Then
what
all of a
comes
sudden,
out of their mouth. This is part
yep,
of my media training. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yep, that's great.
So, but one of the things that Lee and I have also talked about is, like, okay, can we go back a step before we even set aside space on a calendar for these one-on-ones? The second I send out a calendar listing for one-on-ones, the whole team is going to be like, "What's wrong? Why do they want one-on-ones? What's going on?" Blah 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 blah. And then get like this whole other like mini explosion over here. So, what is the proper way to introduce this?
Yeah, it's a great question because I do think sometimes there's a lot of skepticism when those random meeting invites come on into your
Mhm.
calendar. So I think there's a couple things to unpack there. One, how do you make it not random? Where the one-on-one is just literally like, hey, we're having coffee and we're just checking in. How's your weekend type thing, right? How do you kind of diffuse the situation where those one-on-ones aren't so jarring? That would be part one. Part two would be how do you start to set the expectation in the organization that this is something that the organization is looking for and values, right? That we want to start to do this continuous employee listening on a more regular basis. And don't get me wrong, look, the service that I'm trying to provide is more of a best practice of true continuous employee listening. So if you're just starting on this journey, how do you do more frequent listening, right? Where, like I said earlier, employee sentiment changes so rapidly. So how do you start to figure out what's going on? It could be something as simple as, Lee or Audrey, you all decide to leave the organization, right? That sends a shockwave.
So long, suckers.
Yeah, exactly, right? I just won the lottery and we're out, right? But that sends such a shockwave into the organization. So if you know those type of events are going to happen, right? How can you get in front of it and
I
say,
see.
hey, look, now might be a good time for us to go ahead and go start pulse checking the organization in terms of how are you feeling about Lee and Audrey leaving right now, right? Are you nervous? Or is this happening? Is there uncertainty? Do you think there's
Couldn't wait
gaps?
for it to happen.
Yeah, I know couldn't happen soon enough. I get that a lot too from my team.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things that you go ahead and go start to do is like, how do you start to maybe uptick the frequency where these things aren't a surprise when you do set up these one-on-ones or you want to have true, authentic dialogue.
So I'm going to set up an analogy here. I've been into cooking lately, and I've never been a cook. Okay, but made a trip overseas or whatever, came back. Now I'm cooking on a regular basis, and the things that I'm learning though is like cooking and food is not just about taste. There are all the other senses that go into it as well. So with that in mind, it's like so continuous listening. We're listening with more than just our ears, right?
Yes. 100%. And to your point, I think you are listening with yours, but you're also kind of observing other factors that might be happening. Let's travel down that path. My top performers are, right? So Nick is a top performer in my organization, but I start seeing him being a little bit more withdrawn in meetings, right? I start seeing a little bit more silence. I start seeing maybe when we're in those brainstorming sessions, there's just not that oomph anymore of like all these great ideas, right? That might be one of those things that you're observing that you may want to start to figure out, like, how do I go ahead and go check in with Nick right now and say, hey, what's happening right now? Right? Because sometimes those are those indicators that people are just kind of checking out and they might be on their way out the door. And, back to Audrey, what you were talking about, where sometimes this could feel so daunting. And it's like, as an organization, where do I start with continuous employee listening or more frequent listening? Right? I always say start with your top performers, right? If you can have a grasp on who your top performers are in the organization, just kind of start to say, check in with them. Like what's going on, right? Lee, that cooking analogy is fantastic, right? It may not be what you're hearing, but what are you observing with them? Are you seeing different behaviors from them, right? That might be a sign that something might be a little bit off. Because again, when you lose those top performers, we dub it as contagion effect. There's like this turnover contagion effect
Mm,
that happens
mm.
throughout the organization when a
Yeah, it's
top performer,
momentum. Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's
Mhm.
like, hey, oh my gosh, like Nick just left. Like maybe something's going on here, or maybe I need to start looking a little bit, right? That's why I always guide people. Like, if you wanted to start to dabble in this, start with your top performers.
Mm.
Okay, so what are the biggest mistakes that leadership tends to make in not listening to their employees or to their customers?
Great question. So I think when you're not listening to those employees or even your customers, I think that's when distrust starts to erode and it just starts to magnify throughout the organization, right? I think that's the biggest thing. When you ask for feedback, right? And you don't do anything, that's another area where you're just completely just introducing more skepticism in the organization. You're losing credibility as a leader by not following through. One of the things, like if you can't do something, so let's kind of probably, if you're afraid to ask your organization what's going on or asking for feedback, set those guardrails. And one of the biggest examples that I could use on this is compensation is always a tough thing to go ahead and go address when you're asking employees for feedback. I've yet to come across an employee that says that they don't want to be paid more,
Hmm.
right? If you are limited in terms of what you could do with that, don't ask the question and be honest about it and sit there and say, hey, look, we want your feedback. We cannot discuss things around current compensation philosophies right now because of business dynamics, because of XYZ. Give those guardrails because at least people can sit there and say, all right, fine, but I could at least
Mm.
talk to you about XYZ instead. Right. So I think, not following through, um, you know, asking and it just creates a lot of distrust. Excuse me.
What if you don't have anything in particular that you observe is wrong, like your top performer starting to slack off or behaving weird? Um, but you're going to go ahead and mount this program anyway. And then you
Yeah.
go in there and you feel like you're getting gaslit. Everything's fine. It's great. I love it here. Blah, blah. Are there
And when
like a,
something goes wrong, right, then they say, I could have
yes.
told you 2 weeks afterwards or whatever, that wasn't going to work. I was like, well, why
do,
didn't you?
do you have a basic, for the purposes of this interview, top 5 questions to ask as the ice-breaking set of questions in case you don't really
Yeah.
have like something obvious to start with any
Yeah.
given
Hey,
team
great.
on any given day?
Great question. And just to kind of circle back on the gaslighting part, that to me tells me there's something in the organization where there's some type of fear where people don't want to bring things up,
Yeah,
right? Where it's
right.
like you're asking me, but I'm not really giving you my inner voice of what's happening
Mhm.
because I'm afraid what's going to happen. So I think that's a
Mhm.
sign that something culturally is wrong. But if you wanted to go ahead and go start just very simply, I always say, hey, what do you love about your job? Right? I think that's those are great indicators. What are some of the things that just drive you nuts, right? That you just dread doing on a Monday morning? What do you dread on a Monday morning that you're not telling me about right now because you might be trying to because you might be trying to like paint a rosier picture. Like I almost asked that question twice, right? Do you feel like that you've got a career path here, right?
Very
And
important.
do you feel like you're being developed? So, and the reason why the development and the career pathing questions are so important is because, look, we're all at our jobs 40 plus hours a week, right? We're away from our friends, our families, the things that we want to be doing. Most people, by making that sacrifice, they want to make sure that it's worth it and that they're developing and that they're growing as individuals, right? So if you see no growth or you don't see any upward mobility or even horizontal mobility just to kind of get additional skills and capabilities in that backpack, that proverbial backpack, that's like what am I doing here? I'm just I could be doing something else, right? So that's why those questions around development are important to ask.
Mhm. Other than one-on-ones, what are some of the other forms this can take?
Yeah, excuse me. Focus groups are a great way to go ahead and go do this, right? Is like, how do I get a group of people that might be experiencing similar things that we can get some good thematic themes, right? It could also be around the engagement survey term, around that time of that engagement survey, where you go ahead and you ask individuals, hey, look, we're engagement survey. We want to do some deep dives. We definitely want to kind of understand what's going on beneath the surface, right? You said aside from one-on-ones, I just think one-on-ones are a great place to continue to do that, right? So I would continue to add that in that bucket as well. Um, there are other ways you can go ahead and go pulse check your organization. Amazon it does an amazing thing of a question of the day type thing, where I think it's even before you can even log into your system, you have to answer the question of the day in terms of like, how are you feeling right now, or what's your sentiment? And they actually track this stuff. And if you start to respond differently, that shows that, hey, look, there might be an intervention that's needed, right? So you can go super deep on this stuff, but you could just do a question of the day to your organization just to gauge
That's not a bad
employee
idea.
sentiment. This way, again, it's more regular than that annual or quarterly cadence that you may have, right? And then kind of get that data, and you might see that there's some cracks that you weren't expecting. That again, I always say, like, get that crack now before it turns into a full-on cavern.
So you're doing this for the first time. And okay, here's an employee engagement survey. Okay, first time and everything like that.
Yeah,
I imagine some skepticism. You say it's anonymous and everything like that, but I'm not so sure if how I'm going to answer this or whatever. Is this going to get me fired? Or if I
right.
say this in this focus group, is this going to get me fired? So two questions in one, essentially, which um, is it better to have an independent third party do the employees survey? And is it better to have an independent third party to be the one leading the focus group with none of the management and leadership in the room?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And because I'm usually that independent third party, I'm always going to say yes. However, I'm going to give you my experience why I truly do believe that. This was before Nike, I worked for a health insurance company, and we had an independent third party come and do like a lot of our exit interviews, right? The amount of data and the insight that we were obtaining from the independent third party versus us doing it internally was shockingly different. And it was so much richer with that independent third party. Because more often than not, they don't have any skin in the game on this, right? It's like, hey, look, I'm here to collect your feedback as employees and turn this into themes that I can go ahead and go translate into insight and action for leadership, right? That's where I think that independent side of it. But again, can you do this internally? The answer is yes, but there's so much culture work that has to go on where people aren't afraid to go ahead and go bring up those ugly truths that might be out there into the organization where they don't feel like there's going to be repercussion as a result of what they're saying, right? So if you're kind of listening to this and you're like, oh man, like, I don't know if my organization could do that. That's that inner voice already that's telling you that something is incorrect, right?
Mhm.
Where there could be some culture work that you could do to get there, or you hire a third party that can go ahead and help you along this journey to go ahead and go start.
It's
So
interesting.
give me an example of like where this unspoken feedback,
Yeah.
learning about that completely changed how a leader of a company just totally changed how the decisions they made about strategy or about structure or about talent. It's like, give me an impact story here.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we were working for an organization, um, big growth targets, thought everybody was on board, thought that everybody understood what the strategy was. And as we go ahead and and double clicked into it, people had no idea why they were going after different acquisitions. People had no idea why there were new roles and responsibilities being introduced in the organization. But when they announced this big effort at first, everyone seemed like, yep, hey, look, we're good. We understand
Wow.
and whatnot. It was
Mhm.
when we had that ability to go ahead and go really have that safe environment conversation. They're like, we have no idea what person X is trying to achieve with this, right? And we were able to package it up, and it was tough feedback for them to deliver, but we're like, it's what's coming from. So it's like you have to go ahead and go start to address it, where we were able to go ahead and start to really demystify this a little bit more for the rest of the organization, where they understood why these targets were so important, why these acquisition targets were so important, how redundancies weren't going to go ahead and go in impact jobs. Because I think that's what people were afraid to speak up. Lead back to your earlier point is like, hey, if I speak up regarding these potential acquisitions about my own fear of my own safety, I might be on a chopping block, so to speak, right? So we're able to neutralize it with that feedback versus us assuming that everything is okay.
It's
Is
interesting.
AI a hot topic for you right now?
100%. And that's one of the things within inner voice analytics. There's like three pillars of us. There's continuous employee listening, there's helping people change and transform. The third pillar is AI readiness, right? And AI is a huge thing on everyone's mind. But I'll tell you, there's a ton of confusion around AI. Because you say everyone nowadays is just talking about artificial intelligence, AI, AI, AI. What AI are you talking about? Are you talking about machine learning? You
Mhm.
talking about conversational AI? You talking about generative
Mhm.
AI like ChatGPT? You talking about agentic AI? So that's one of the things that we also go ahead and go work with organizations in terms of like how you could use these different things to have a healthy balance.
Yeah, I asked the question about AI because it goes part and parcel with the previous part. And the theme that I'm looking at here is fear.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fear I don't want to answer the survey, fear I don't want to say this out loud, a fear I have of AI taking my job.
Yep.
So, how much of all this can you really just tie back to fear?
Yeah, it's a lot of it, and especially with the AI on top of it. And that's why I think that demystifying AI is so important in organizations. So I'll give you a quick example on it. So conversational AI, right? That's not ChatGPT. Conversational AI is like a lot of the stuff that you see on websites where you see like a little chat bot
Oh, okay.
and you chat
Yeah.
with it, and then it spits back information. Organizations could go ahead and go implement conversational AI relatively easy, leveraging their existing policies. And all you're doing is dumping in policies and procedures and information into this chatbot that it basically says, all right, this is my boundary. I don't go beyond these policies and procedures in this chat. That's conversational AI. You could easily implement that and get a lot of ROI on that investment um, very, very easily. Okay. Um, People don't understand that. They just think that, oh no, somebody's going to come on and take my job. Yeah, that
This
could happen.
robot is going to walk through the door one day.
Yeah. But look, it is a reality, right?
Mhm.
That AI can go ahead and go do that. But I think, but back to the whole point on the listening part of it. This is the type of stuff that I, as a leader, would love to understand. This way I could start to say, because everyone has AI on their roadmaps. I
Mhm.
would love to know these fears. This way I could talk to my organization and say, all right, let's go ahead and go dissect AI. Here's how we're planning on using AI, more conversational AI. We're looking at doing more machine learning AI. Yeah, there might be some areas where we're trying to do agentic AI, which is where that's where a lot of workflows and execution comes on into play, which could impact jobs, right? But there are ways to go ahead and go storytell this versus just saying we're doing artificial intelligence.
Hmm. Having been a television news reporter for years and being naturally nosy, I would love to be a fly on the wall and in your business. Just listen to you one of your days with your clients. My God, the stuff that you must hear.
Fly on the wall would have been a good name for the company,
I know,
actually.
fly on the wall.
Actually, that would
No, it's
that
not
would
flyonthewall.com. It's innervoiceanalytics.com, everybody. And Nick Montalbine, that's straight up the name on LinkedIn. Let me spell Nick's last name, everybody. It's Montalbine. Nick, this has been great. Lee, do you have a final question?
You know what? I actually don't. I've been listening
Okay.
intently.
Thanks for coming, Nick. This is very informative. Great tips.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me, and I really appreciate it, Audrey and Lee. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information at salesfuel.com.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.